Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Robert. It's wonderful to be here to talk about global supply chain problems. I'm director of the Center for Environment, Climate and Energy at the Heritage Foundation, and I'm going to focus on electric vehicles. So I'd like to start out by asking all of you a question. And my talk is going to be short, so afterwards, if you like, you can ask me questions. But I'd like to ask you, how many of you have seen Santa Claus? Put your hand up. Good. A few people over here. You have, good. How many of you have seen the Tooth Fairy? No? One's seen the Tooth Fairy. How many of you have seen a European or American-made battery for an electric vehicle? None of you. Well, that's right. That's because China makes 80% of the batteries. And in some of the countries where there are electric battery plants, it's China that is running those plants. Europe and the United States are moving to replace gasoline-powered engines with electric vehicles, and EVs are also becoming more popular in Asia and Latin America. Here's the problem. The world is in danger of being dependent on China for these vehicles because China is producing EVs and batteries. Now, all of you are legislators. Raise your hands if you're parliamentarians or legislators. Do you have any legislators here? Well, you can fix this problem. You can fix this problem because it is a self-inflicted wound. Under pressure from governments, many automakers are saying that they are going to phase out production of gasoline-powered vehicles by 2035 and only make electric vehicles. That means that we are going to be dependent on China for those batteries. But if they didn't say that, if all of you did not say that, if you welcomed gasoline-powered vehicles, then you would be able to depend on many sources of supply for gasoline. And the United States is the largest producer of oil and natural gas in the world, produces a lot of gasoline. Now, I'm all in favor of people who want to buy an electric vehicle to buy that electric vehicle. But I don't think people should be forced to buy electric vehicles. I mean, just recently, just this month, the Mayor of London has extended the ultra-low emissions zone, and that's going to force people out of their old cars into new cars, many of them electric vehicles. So the question is, why can't we in our countries make batteries the same way that China makes them? Well, China subsidizes labor, energy, and capital. Labor, because the wage rates are lower. Plus, they can use child labor and they can use forced slave labor from the Uyghurs. I mean, in America, we can't use child labor, we cannot use forced slave labor, the same in Europe. Look at energy. In America, in Europe, we have many, many rules about how we are allowed to produce energy. China's building 2 coal-fired power plants every week. When US climate envoy John Kerry was visiting, China said it was not going to abide by the Paris Agreement and peak its emissions at 2030. Said it was going to peak its emissions on its own schedule. That means that energy in China is less expensive than in Western Europe and in the United States. Then take capital. Everyone knows that the Chinese Communist Party gives artificially low interest rates, lends capital at artificially low interest rates to its favored companies, including CATL, the largest battery manufacturer in the world. So that's why it's going to be very difficult for all of us to compete with China in the EV area. Here's another reason. Batteries weigh 1,000 pounds. They contain lithium, cobalt, graphite, and nickel, and copper. Each battery requires 100,000 pounds of ore to get the right materials. And to get these 100,000 pounds of ore, you need to move 500,000 pounds of earth and minerals. I'm very grateful to Lou Pugliaresi, who's going to speak to you tomorrow on energy, and who's sitting right here in the second row for this information, which he gave at a very interesting presentation yesterday at the Institute for Economic Affairs. The United States produces about 1% of the world's lithium, and it could produce more, but The government in the United States and also European governments are against mining. So it's so odd. There's environmentalists. They want to mandate electric vehicles. And all of you as legislators, I'm sure you've taken part in bills that require electric vehicles. But on the other hand, some legislators don't want to allow the mining that would enable these minerals to be produced in their own countries and thereby to help production of the electric batteries in their own countries. So the American government is blocking a lithium mine in Thacker Pass, which is probably the largest deposit in the United States in Nevada. President Biden has just declared a very large area near the Grand Canyon off limits to any mining or exploration. But while America and Europe are blocking the mining of these minerals, China is monopolizing strategic minerals in Africa and using these against Europe and the United States. Just yesterday, there was a military coup in Gabon. By my calculations, and it's difficult to calculate these things, this was the 10th coup in West and Central Africa in the past 3 years, following last month's coup in Niger. We find that Russia and China are moving into these countries to take advantage of the minerals for electric batteries and natural resources. China exports corruption and Chinese labor to Africa and Latin America and strips countries' natural resources. Well, all of you as legislators, you can support emerging economies in Africa with technology, with training, with investments. I mean, look at Niger. President Bazoum is out. The Russians and Chinese are moving in. Rather than trying to support President Bazoum, who is definitely not going to make it, your governments could be calling the coup leaders and saying, we will support you, but keep Russia and China out. I mean, we can influence these coup leaders if the people who they have deposed are definitely not going to make it. Well, China is taking over the car and EV market all over the world. GM and Ford once dominated Latin American markets, but the Chinese automakers are taking over there very fast. Last year, China surpassed the United States as the main supplier of cars to Latin America. Half of GM sales in Latin America are imports from its subsidiary in China, and the Chinese car and battery manufacturer BYD started exporting the Yuan Plus to Mexico in July. BYD has also taken over the Ford plant in Brazil, and Great Wall Motors, another Chinese company, is investing $1.9 billion into Brazil and is going to start production in May 2024. Believe it or not, and I didn't believe it, but I checked it and it was true, the US Embassy in Havana, Cuba, is leasing Chinese EVs from the Cuban government because they can't import their own. This has security problems, as we just heard, due to tracking of their components. The bottom line is that most of us seem to have no answer for Chinese low-cost manufacturing advantages, especially for vehicles. It's not just EVs. Another global supply chain problem is the Chinese are also trying to take over the movement for renewable diesel. Again, this is a self-inflicted wound on the part of the United States. There's a new law called the Inflation Reduction Act to produce renewable diesel, and China is taking advantage of these tax credits and investing in renewable energy, renewable diesel in the United States. Now, all of you are going to say, but what about the climate? Well, if the United States stopped producing any fossil fuels, didn't use any fossil fuels at all, the difference in terms of global temperatures would be 0.2 of 1 degree centigrade by 2100. And there's similar data for Europe. We are doing this just all for nothing. This is not helping the climate. Meanwhile, China is building 2 coal-fired power plants a week and has, as I said, walked away from its commitment. Asia, Africa, Latin America are increasing fossil fuel consumption, quite rightly so, because they want to get to Western standards of living. It's not fair that we say to Latin America and Africa, you have to have low standards of living and only work for renewables. So what can all of us do? What can you do as legislators? Well, you can roll back the EV mandates, let people who want to buy EVs buy them and not force other people. Spread clean technology all over the world. Do you know the World Bank refuses to lend to emerging economies for fossil fuel plants, for clean natural gas, for nuclear power? So we could encourage the spread of clean natural gas and nuclear power, and that would reduce global emissions. So in the United States, there have been 1,000 million metric tons of carbon fewer. In other words, carbon emissions have declined in the United States over the past 15 years by 1,000 million metric tons because of the use of clean natural gas. And this clean natural gas can be produced in other countries, in emerging economies. It can also be exported from the United States to these economies. And the World Bank ban on using these technologies just plays into the hands of China and keeps living standards down. We can focus on supporting African and Latin American countries with strategic minerals through technology, training, education, and investment to be free of China. So I would say that there is a message of hope. All of you as legislators, you can all do something about this. We don't have to inflict these wounds on ourselves and give the global supply chain to China. And with that afterwards, if Congressman Pettinger allows, I'd be happy to answer questions or answer any questions during the breaks. Thank you so much for listening.